This video has been brought to you by Fuji Videotape. Put the good stuff on the good stuff. When people hear the name George Carlin, this is probably the first thing that comes to their minds.
Jumbo shrimp. Those words don't even go together, man. That's like military intelligence. They have that too. How did they do that? That's what they tell you. Get on the plane. Get on the plane. Fuck you. I'm getting in the plane. I wonder a lot of things, but that's my job. My job is thinking up goofy shit. I'll sleet here, you hippy-dippy weather, man. With all the hippy-dippy weather, man. Got into an argument with my Rice Krispies. I distinctly heard snap, crackle, fuck him. Have a nice day. And the original list was shit, piss, fuck, cunt, cocksucker, motherfucker, and tits. This was all I could think of in one sitting.
That's all your house is. It's a place to keep your stuff while you go out and get more stuff. But here's a little cheer. A lot of people like it. It goes like this.
Rat shit, bat shit, dirty old twat. 69 assholes tied in a knot. Hooray! Lizard shit, fuck!
I never fucked a 10, but one night I fucked 5 2s.
Doesn't it strike you as mildly ironic that most of the people who are against abortion are people you wouldn't want to fuck in the first place? And now they're thinking about banning toy guns, and they're gonna keep the fucking real ones!
But when I think of George Carlin, the first thing that comes to my mind is this.
Ah, Mr. Conductor, come on in, stay a while.
Well, don't mind if I do, Billy.
Hey, Mr. Conductor. How's Thomas and Bertie and James and Edward and everyone else on the island?
Wow. Let me think. Well, good, very good, pretty good, and awful.
I think you're going to have to explain a little bit better than that, Mr. Conductor.
Explain what?
Well, explain what's happening on the island of Sodor.
Well, that's what I've been trying to do. Thomas was having a good day, but Bertie wasn't having a good day at all. Well, let me tell you about it.
Like many kids growing up during the 1990s and early 2000s, I was absolutely obsessed with Thomas the Tank Engine. I had the toys, the books, the videos, and of course, Thomas on TV. Specifically in the form of PBS's Shining Time station. Every day I would tune in to hear the stories of this little blue train and his railway pals at this train station. And the person who would tell these stories was an 18-inch tall man who went by the name of Mr. Conductor. Though Ringo Starr was Mr. Conductor during the show's first season, to me, the man who played the Mr. Conductor that I knew is none other than George Carlin. Despite that, most people I've seen know him not as a train conductor, but more for his rather vulgar stand-up comedy. So how did someone who said this on stage...
As soon as I put this hot poker in my ass, I'm going to chop my dick off.
end up doing a kid show of all things?
You mean you don't know the story about Thomas, Percy, and the coal? All right. I'll tell you about it.
And more importantly, why did this man mean so much to me as a child despite me not knowing about him until my adult years? Who was the George Carlin that I knew? Well, let's start at the beginning. But first, a word from our sponsor.
Hey, what if people really did turn green with envy? Well, for one thing, it would be a whole lot easier to watch TV. I mean, cowards would be yellow, heroes would be true blue, and of course, you'd want to record them all on Fuji Videotape, the good stuff. With Fuji, blue stuff is blue stuff, and yellow stuff is yellow stuff. So, you'll always recognize a yellow-bellied, black-hearted villain who's green with envy. And you'll catch him red-handed.
Fuji Videotape. Put the good stuff on the good stuff.
The year was 1979. A young woman named Britt Allcroft met a clergyman named Wilbert Audrey on the Bluebell Railway in England. Britt fell in love with Wilbert's stories about a fleet of colorful railway engines on the fictional island of Sodor, off the coast of Barrow-in-Furness in England and just east of the Isle of Man. She had talked with Wilbert about her plans on making a TV series based on the books, though Wilbert was hesitant, especially after a disastrous attempt on BBC television in 1953. However, he agreed to the idea and allowed Britt to adapt the stories for television. In the end, Britt decided that the series would be filmed using live-action models of trains, with special effects technician David Mitton serving as director. Together with the team at Clearwater Features, including producer Robert Cardona, musicians Mike O'Donnell and Junior Campbell, and narrator Ringo Starr, yes, the drummer for the Beatles, production began. Between 1984 and 1986, 2 seasons of 5-minute stories were broadcast for the first time on UK television, and it was an instant success. So much so that Britt Allcroft sought out to bring Thomas to other countries around the world, including Norway, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and of course, the United States of America. In early 1988, Rick Sigelko, a producer working at PBS's station in New York City, WNET, was given a tape that featured an early cut of the Thomas the Tank Engine story, Thomas Down the Mine.
My first introduction to Thomas, I was on an elevator at WNET, which is the local PBS station. And the head of the station had just come back from England. And he handed me a cassette, and he said, take a look at it and see if we can do anything with it. And when I put it in the VCR, it was an early cut of Thomas the Tank Engine. And so that was the first time I think probably anyone in the United States had ever actually seen Thomas. I showed it to my wife, then I took it to a preschool, and I showed it to some kids there. And I could see how much they loved it. I realized it was something really special. It was a huge show in the United States. Bigger, really, in its day than any other kid show that's on right now.
Not long after, Rick met with Britt, and together they devised a plan to bring Thomas to American audiences. Britt knew that American television programming was different from that in the UK. For one thing, many shows at the time ran during either half-hour or full-hour blocks, so just showing the 11-minute episodes with just 2 stories apiece wouldn't work. Instead, they came up with the idea of a new show that would be used as a gateway to air the Thomas stories. The setting? A train station at a railroad, in which a magical miniature train conductor inhabits. The conductor would be played by the narrator at the time, Ringo Starr. And there would be other characters, including a station manager, an engineer, and even an arcade owner, as well as a couple of kids who would be friends with the conductor and enjoyed the stories about Thomas and his friends. What was it going to be called? Shining Time Station.
Well, you're a good worker. You know who'd like you? My friend Thomas.
Is Thomas living there with you?
Dear me, no. Thomas is a steam engine, and he lives on the island of Sodor. You are interested in trains, aren't you?
Yes, sir.
Splendid. Then I'll tell you a story about my friend Thomas. You do like stories, don't you?
Oh, yes.
Very well, but first I have to find my whistle. Here we go.
Shining Time Station first aired on PBS in January 1989 and was an instant success. Kids and their parents fell in love with the little blue tank engine and the adventures of him and his friends. It even rivaled the success of other PBS shows such as Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. By 1990, fans wanted more of Shining Time Station and more of Thomas, and by 1991, plans for a second season were quickly made. But there was a problem. They had to recast Mr. Conductor. See, around the time Shining Time was making it big in America, Ringo had also gained a newfound interest in continuing his music career, as well as starting up his all-star band. So Britt had to find a new storyteller for the UK.
Now that's what I call dead lucky.
And a new actor for Mr. Conductor. The person they found for the latter was an interesting choice, to say the least.
Ladies and gentlemen, George Carlin!
Like I said, George was mainly known for his stand-up comedy, and let's just say it's not the most kid-friendly thing in the world.
So, the words, as I say, shit, piss, fuck, cunt, cocksucker, motherfucker, tits, fart, turd, and twat.
Even George himself was hesitant about taking on the role at first. It's not that George wasn't interested in acting, far from it, if his roles in movies like With Six You Get Egg Roll, Car Wash, and Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure were anything to go by. But at the same time, he wanted to show people a different side to him beyond just funny guy who uses profanities on stage. So eventually he agreed to the role and met with Britt in Toronto to start recording some of the stories. So why was George hesitant about taking on the role as a storyteller? Well, according to Britt, he was nervous about recording in a booth all by himself with no audience. Since they couldn't bring a real child into the booth, Britt decided to bring a teddy bear into the booth, and George would read to the bear as if he were a grandfather reading a bedtime story to a young child. As for the segments with Mr. Conductor, the segments were usually recorded in a green screen room and will later be added in with the station scenes.
Becky, I've seen happier faces in a frowning contest.
Not only did Thomas have a new voice, but Shining Time Station had a new Mr. Conductor.
This is PBS.
Like I said at the start of this video, I grew up watching PBS, specifically via the stations WETA in Washington, D.C. and Maryland Public Television in Baltimore. To say that I was an avid PBS viewer during my youth would be an understatement. To me, the characters that I saw on the screen were like friends that I would visit every day and sharing their adventures. Some of my favorites include an 8-foot-tall yellow bird, a kind old man in a sweater, an aardvark with glasses, and even a big purple dinosaur. But my personal favorite out of all of them was a friendly blue tank engine whose name was Thomas. How did I discover this star of my childhood? As I've said a million times before, it was through this.
Reach for the speed, reach for the whistle, go where the rail may run. Reach for the words, reach for the story, follow the rainbow sun. To a shining time station, where dreams can come true, waiting there for you.
It was 1994, and I was around 2 years old when I first discovered Thomas and Shining Time Station. I don't remember what episode it was, but it would have to have been from one of the first 3 seasons of the show. Nevertheless, I really took to George's narration for these stories, as well as the voices he did for the characters. Some of my favorites included Gordon, the big engine.
Puh, said Gordon. Who cares? A lot of fuss about nothing, if you ask me.
Donald and Douglas, the Scottish twins.
You're a muckle nuisance, said Donald. It's to leave you behind I be wanting. Anyone would think, said Douglas, that Donald had had his accident on purpose. I hear tell about an engine and some tar wagons.
Bill and Ben, the tank engine twins.
It's a waddle? asked Bill. A diseasel, I think, replied Ben. There's a notice about them in our shed. Coughs and sneezels spread diseasel. You had a cough in your smoke box yesterday. It's your fault the diseasel came. It isn't. It is.
Devious Diesel, the Diesel.
Your worthy Sir Topham Hatt thinks I need to learn. He is mistaken. We Diesels don't need to learn. We know everything. We come to a yard and improve it. We are revolutionary.
Harold the helicopter.
Good morning, word Harold. I always said railways were out of date, but you're so slow with the mail. You should give everyone their stamps back.
Trevor the traction engine.
The vicar says that not all children are able to have holidays by the sea, so he's having a garden party to raise money for a seaside trip.
And even later voices like Duke and Duncan.
You impertinent scallywags, Duke would say. Whatever are you engines coming to? Well, you'd better mind, unless you want to end up like Smudger. I'm a plain, blunt engine. I speak as I find. Tunnels should be tunnels and not rabbit holes. This railway is no good at all.
I should probably also mention Thomas on home video. The first Thomas home video release I ever personally owned was James Goes Buzz Buzz and Other Stories, which featured, you guessed it, George Carlin as the narrator.
I wouldn't care if hundreds were swarming around. I'd just blow smoke and make them buzz off. So it stung James right back on the nose. Eee! Whistled James.
From there, the collection grew. Some of these tapes I owned growing up, some I would collect as I got older, and some I would rent from this public library. It was also through said public library that I found out not only the latest releases of the show, but also a couple of other narrators whom I want to bring up. First, the second Mr. Conductor that I knew, as well as my eventual idol.
I wonder if you could tell us, Ringo, the story behind how you actually got involved with it.
How I got involved, I was the lady who put it together, Britt Allcroft, came to the house one day and she said she had this idea for me to narrate these books. Sorry. And just trying to liven myself up, folks.
I think I was around 4 when I first discovered Thomas episodes narrated by Ringo Starr. The first tape I saw that featured Ringo was Thomas Gets Tricked and Other Stories, which coincidentally also happened to be the first home video release for Thomas in the US.
Thomas thinks no engine works as hard as he does. He loves playing tricks on them, including Gordon, the biggest and proudest engine of all. Thomas likes to tease Gordon with his whistle. Wake up, lazy bones, why don't you work hard like me?
Now, I like Ringo's narration too. Not as good as George in my books, but I thought he did a solid job as a narrator. Of course, I would become a fan of Ringo through a different form of entertainment.
Oh yeah, I'll tell you something I think you'll understand when I say that something I wanna.
That's right. The man who was the first ever narrator of Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends also happened to be the drummer of my #1 favorite band of all time, the Beatles. And what's more, in September of 2022, my sister, along with her fiancé and family, took me to see Ringo's all-star band live at the Pittsburgh Penguins Stadium. It was a magical night that I'll never forget.
If you wanna sing the blues, you know it don't come easy. You don't have to shout all these numbers. You can even play them easy.
But back on topic. I think Ringo's a pretty good narrator overall, but honestly I prefer George. I think what might have helped my case, aside from more exposure to one than the other, was that prior to 1999, we really only had 2 narrators stateside, and only one of them was good with voices, so if you watch these tapes enough times, one of them will eventually grow on you. We now come to February 1999. I was making a trip to the local library with my dad and sisters. We head over to the video section of the library, and this is what I see. What's this? New Thomas content? Must check out. I get home, I pop in the VHS, and immediately I noticed something was off. Hey, wait a minute. Who the heck is this Alec Baldwin guy I never heard of? What happened to George? That's when it hit me. The series had a new narrator. From what I've seen, a lot of people regard Season 5 as their favorite season of Thomas and Friends. Sadly, I'm not one of those people. I don't hate the season, but for me, it's one that I respect more than I like. To this day, I'm not really sure if the switch from George to Alec had anything to do with why I don't love Season 5 as much as 1 through 4, but I don't think it helped any. Not to put down Alec Baldwin, I do think he's a good actor, but as far as Thomas narrators go, I think he's one of the worst. That said, at least he put more effort into his Season 5 narrations than the ones he did for Season 6.
Stop being pushy, Donald snapped. Don't call me pushy, Douglas snapped back. You shouldn't have pushed me into the cart, huffed Donald. You pulled me, you mean, argued Douglas. Didn't. Did. Did not. Did too.
After Season 6, Alec left the show. Then some guy from the UK named Michael Angelis narrated some episodes. I thought he was decent.
There will be a party for our guests at Marron Station. That's far away over Gordon's Hill. You'll need to take on plenty of water, muttered Gordon. I have plenty of water, wheezed Spencer. And he raced away. I was only trying to be useful, grunted Gordon.
Then, in 2004, there was another new narrator by the name of Michael Brandon, and...
Cinders and ashes, cried Thomas. The troublesome trucks are heading for the new station, and they're going too fast. I must warn the station master.
Let's just say that around 2005 or so, I decided to take a break from Thomas. At that point, I had already accepted that the guy knew as Mr. Conductor wasn't going to come back. The show in 2005 felt different compared to the show I grew up with. It's time I moved on. Little did I know, but a few years later, I would slowly come back, though not without hearing some tragic news first. June 22nd, 2008. I had just finished up my sophomore year of high school. By this point, I wasn't really following Thomas much anymore, focusing my attention on other things. Last season I remember watching was Season 8, and a little bit of Season 9 on PBS Kids. The show had gone on for a couple more seasons at that point with the models, and even a special featuring a new character being released that year. Unbeknownst to me, the show was going through a few changes. The main one being that the series was going to be CGI animated beginning in the new season, with the new studio being located in Vancouver, Canada, as opposed to Shepperton Studios in England. On top of that, the longtime series director David Mitton had sadly passed on the month before due to heart failure. That evening, another well-known person associated with Thomas had also left us. Monday the 23rd, I met with my dad to get my hair cut. The minute I got in the car, he told me, and I quote, "George Carlin died. He had a heart attack." I could not believe it. The voice of my childhood, the man I knew as Mr. Conductor, was gone. It broke my heart.
Here I go again. Why does the ghost of love still haunt me? It's all been cried about before. It's all been cried about before. It's all been cried about before.
Later that year, I was doing an errand with my dad, and a comedy skit was being played on the radio station that we were listening to, and a familiar voice came on the radio.
Baseball is pastoral, 19th century. Football is technological, 20th century. Baseball is played on a diamond in a park, the baseball park. Football is played on a gridiron in a stadium, War Memorial Stadium. In baseball, you wear a cap. In football, you wear a helmet. Baseball has a 7th inning stretch. Football has a 2-minute warning.
Upon hearing it, I was like, Is that? My dad said, Yep, that's George Carlin. That led me to thinking, what was this other side of George Carlin that I never knew? At that point, I knew Carlin was a comedian because my dad told me about him, but I never knew about his comedy up to that point. Around November 2008, I was on YouTube and I came across a channel called Gordon the Comedian.
Listening to the comedians who comment on political, social, and cultural issues, I noticed that most of their material reflects kind of an underlying belief that somehow things were better once, and with just a little effort we could set them right again. They're looking for solutions and rooting for particular results, and I think that limits the tone and substance of what they say. They're talented and funny people, but they're really nothing more than cheerleaders attached to a specific wished-for outcome. I don't feel so confined. I frankly don't give a fuck how it all turns out in this country, or anywhere else for that matter. I think the human game was up a long time ago when the high priests and traders took over. And now we're just playing out the string. And that is, of course, precisely what I find so amusing. The slow circling of the drain by a once promising species, and the sappy, ever more desperate belief in this country that there is actually some sort of an American dream which has merely been misplaced.
Little did I know, but this channel was made by the guy who became one of my main inspirations for YouTube. There really isn't much to say about these videos. Mostly it was clips from Thomas and Friends over audio from George Carlin's audiobooks, comedy albums, and HBO specials, among other bits and bobs.
Hey, are you watching me now, or did you videotape me before? Hey, if you tape me before, you're not watching me now. But if you use Fuji videotape, no matter how much later it is, it will always look as good as now. See you later.
Sometime later, I came across another YouTube channel called George Carlin Central, and it had links to Carlin's audiobooks as well as his comedy albums.
I'm a modern man, a man for the millennium, digital and smoke-free, a diversified multicultural postmodern deconstructionist, politically, anatomically, and ecologically incorrect. I've been uplinked and downloaded, I've been inputted and outsourced. I know the upside of downsizing, I know the downside of upgrading. I'm a high-tech lowlife, a cutting-edge, state-of-the-art, bi-coastal multitasker, and I can give you a gigabyte in a nanosecond.
Originally, this job was called Fool. Always want to put it down under occupation on the form, you know? Occupation, Fool. I think I'd spell it with the final E just to piss him off, you know?
I understand your son's a fool, Mrs. Carlin.
America's fastest rising young fool.
In 2013, I came across rips from Carlin's HBO specials via Daily Motion, uploaded by a user called the Rusty Fish Plate.
You were probably out walking your dog, which is what I'm usually doing. Walking my dog. Because I love my dog. I love all my dogs. I love every dog I ever had. I remember them all, and I love every one of them. Still love all my dogs, and I've had me a lot of goddamn dogs. In my lifetime, I have had me a bunch of different dogs. Because you do keep getting a new dog, don't you? You just keep getting one dog right after another. That's the whole secret of life. Life is a series of dogs. It's true, you just keep getting a new dog, don't you? That's what's good about them, they don't live too long. And you can go get a new goddamn dog. Sometimes you can get a dog looks exactly like the dog you used to have. Right? You shop around a little bit, you can find a dog identical to your former dog. And that's real handy because you don't have to change the pictures on your mirror or anything. Right? You just bring the dead one into the pet shop, throw them up on the counter and say, give me another one of them. That was real good. And they'll give you a carbon copy of your ex-goddamn dog.
And then there's George Carlin dubbing Thomas the Tank Engine. Basically, take clips from a Thomas episode featuring Carlin's narration, replace some of the dialogue with audio from one of his audiobooks, and the result is basically this.
1, 2, 3.
Suddenly, like magic, the station was flooded with lights,
Jesus, can you believe it's Christmas again?
said Sir Topham Hatt.
Holy Christ, the Christmas tree's on fire. Holy fucking shit. Oh, good Lord.
A crate of treacle was upset all over Percy.
Not only does shit happen,
said Percy,
it also falls on your head.
Sir Topham Hatt was having breakfast.
How would you like a nice tongue sandwich? It's made from slices of a cow's tongue. Are you fucking trying to make me sick?
Said Sir Topham Hatt. Maybe we'll stop feeling cold if we talk about warm things, like sunshine and steam.
Or a nice tattoo of Madonna with her hand up your ass,
muttered Thomas.
I'll chuff and I'll puff and I'll break your door in.
Drives me crazy. Close the fucking door, will you? You're letting out all the cold. Look, here's $20. Go down to Burger King, why don't you? I'll save that much on electricity. Close the goddamn door.
For the record, Jaw 2 is a freaking genius, and I love them for making this. So here we are in 2023. It's been 15 years since George left this earth. Jon Stewart once considered Mr. Carlin as part of the holy trinity of stand-up comedy, along with Lenny Bruce and Richard Pryor. And while he's certainly my all-time favorite comedian, to me, he will always be remembered as the 18-inch tall train conductor from Shining Time Station. He even spoke fondly about his time on the show as late as December 17, 2007, in an interview with TV Legends.
They came to me, and the reason I took it was here's that acting thing over here looking at me. I thought, well, I'll show another side of myself. I'll show a side that no one's expecting. And Mr. Conductor was complete departure from anything anyone would have expected from me, judging me by my persona on stage. So I did them, and it was fun, and they're out there, and I have them, and they're good. But they didn't take me anywhere.
So thank you, George. Thank you for the memories. Whether it be through your comedy or through your narrations, your legend will live on forever.
I don't know about that, kid. To hell with it.